All right, and hello, welcome back to another episode of Butler's Babble. We're starting to get a lot more of these coming on. It used to be once a month, but now we're roaring, and we're on our second one of this last 2 weeks now. So we have an awesome guest coming up. I say that every time, but we always do get the most amazing people come on this show and share their stories with us. But just before we get over to our guest, I just want to remind you guys we are coming to you live through Facebook right now and through YouTube, and we're using StreamYard. So in order for us to know when you're making comments who you are, and we can bring your comments up on the screen or your questions, please go to streamyard.com /Facebook. That's it. And give them permission. I'll put it right up on the screen. It's right there. Streamyard.com /Facebook. Give StreamYard permission to use your name and picture, and that way we can actually bring your name and picture in when we ask the questions. If not, make sure you sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. We have an amazing gentleman here that's going to come on here with us today and share his story with us. So let's bring him on right now. And I've butchered his name a couple times already, so I'm going to try and get it right this time. But we have Chris Romulo on here. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
That was perfect.
Okay, good.
Perfect. How's it going,
How's
John?
your day been going so far today?
Oh, it's been going great. I got a chance to drive into the city, and I made it back safe and sound. So that's always great.
Good job. Yeah, because for people that don't know, you're out in New York, New Jersey area, correct?
Yes, yeah. I live in New Jersey, and I grew up. Well, obviously, I'll go into that in my story. But yeah, I grew up in New York, but I went into the city today to help my parents out and get them to a doctor's appointment. And I got through traffic unscathed.
Good. Exactly. See, the only times I know of New Jersey is of course, from sports. I'm a big hockey fan. You got the New Jersey Devils, of course.
Right.
And then growing up, I was a big fan. I'm a big mob fan, watching mob movies and mob specials. And of course, The Sopranos, if I'm not mistaken, that was a whole New Jersey thing. And you see him going over the bridge and everything. So that's what I have in my brain is that bridge, that big bridge he's driving down the street, the beginning credits there. So
yeah. Oh yeah. There's a Jersey, like Queens, Brooklyn connection when it comes to anything mob related. So yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not a mob show, so we won't go into all that kind of stuff. So why don't you give everybody who doesn't know or have never heard of Chris before, give us a little background on you, where you grew up, your family life, things like that.
Okay. I was born and raised in Queens. I started my childhood in Elmhurst, Queens, which is one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the city, if not the country. I mean, Elmhurst, Roosevelt Avenue. So, if anybody who's listening who comes from that area, shout out to you guys. But around 9 years old, we were living in an apartment building in Elmhurst. And at around 8 or 9 years old, my parents decided they wanted to, move out of the apartment building, which was like a 1 bedroom apartment. And it was like 4 or 5 of us living in a 1 bedroom apartment. And they wanted to live the American dream and buy a home. And we did that at around 9 years old. So my parents moved me to Queens Village, New York, me, my brother. And at the time, it was my grandmother who was living with us at the time. And Queens Village was, it was only about 10 miles away from Elmhurst, but it felt like, a whole different world. We went from definitely a more crowded urban area to a little more I guess, not suburban, because I guess you would still consider it the city, but it was row houses. So every house looked the same on the block. And it was a different world for me at that time. But luckily, I made some friends on the block. I would ride my bike around the neighborhood, with a couple friends that I had, and started listening to. When I first moved there, I remember I started listening to heavy metal music because there was a family on the block who loved listening, and actually they would reenact Kiss. Right. The guys that, yeah, it was just amazing to me. Growing up in Elmhurst, I didn't really, at that time, I don't remember listening to music much, but moving into Queens Village, I met this family. I think it was like 5 boys and 3 girls in this family. And they were just Kiss fanatics, and they would hold these concerts in their backyard, and they would spit the fire out of their mouths, and they had the makeup and everything. And I really got into that.
That intrigued you.
Yeah, oh yeah, I got into that for a while until I got into hip hop music. I guess
Okay.
I don't
So
know.
this is in the 80s, I guess?
Yeah, I would say when did I move in to Queens Village? I would say I was 8 years old, so I would say like 82 or 83.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yep.
80s. Yeah,
That's when
definitely.
I was getting into that kind of rock music and stuff like that, the hair bands and stuff, and you're getting into
Yeah,
hip hop at this time.
yeah. It's funny looking back. I don't have any hair now, but I don't remember what I did with my hair back then either. So. But yeah, and then so I guess I would say like 85, I
Okay.
started listening. I shift my genre of music. I started listening to more of the hip hop and the rap, like Run DMC. Actually, Run DMC was from my neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Salt and Pepper.
Yep.
One of the girls actually lived up the block from me, so hip hop was definitely a big
Oh,
thing
yeah.
where I was growing up. You
Salt
know,
and Pepper. I remember
yeah,
them.
Salt
Yeah.
and
And
Pepper. Yeah,
Run
oh yeah,
DMC was big back then, even when they did the song with what is it, Aerosmith back then too.
oh yeah, yeah, oh
Walk
yeah.
This Way, I believe it was. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. So yeah, I would I lived in a small two-bedroom house with my family, and I have two. At that time, it was only me and my little brother, and then my youngest brother came along, so it was three of us with my grandmother and my parents living in a nice cozy two-bedroom apartment,
Mhm.
and things were at the time things were great. At first it was scary because moving from a new neighborhood, leaving your whole life behind. But then again, I made a good friend who lived right across the street from me. I remember the first day we were moving in with our moving truck, he came over and he was out helping us move, and yeah, he's been a great friend ever since. So
Now,
yeah.
when you moved in there, was this like a multicultural area of the town, or was it, were you guys minorities there, or
Yeah, I would say we were the only Filipino American
okay.
family in the neighborhood that I know of at the time. It was predominantly, maybe Caribbean, Latino, and yeah, there were, yeah, and actually, yeah, a white neighborhood as well. So
Mm,
there was a mix, but I would definitely say that we were the only Filipino Americans
okay,
within, I don't know, maybe, at least a 20 block radius that I knew
okay.
of. Yeah.
So
So that
between your 2
that
younger
that
brothers, your grandma, and everything, okay?
yeah, yeah, and that got a little challenging, especially, going into elementary school, being the only Filipino American kid in school,
Mhm.
but, it was, how would I put it? It was definitely a challenge that, it shaped me,
Yep.
to the person I am today, so.
Definitely. And then, so in school, like were you more of a quiet kid? Were you more of the academic? Were you more of the bookworm? Were you the sports guy? Or what were you kind of like in school?
So back in Elmhurst, I would say I was definitely more the academic kid. I remember being on the honor roll in the 3rd grade, but moving into Queens Village in the 4th grade, uh, somehow I got put into a class that was I would looking back, I think it was more like of a remedial class. So
Okay.
I was in a class where kids were maybe struggling a little, and I think that was a turning point for me as far as education because my 4th grade teacher was pretty angry. It seemed like he didn't really love what he was doing, and he would take that out on us. I remember being physically abused, being pinched, when he was angry or if he felt like kids weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. And that really sent a message to me in the 4th grade that wow, this is a whole different world again, and I don't enjoy this. And I started to, I guess, become put myself more in a shell. I would
Okay.
say in the 4th grade. So yeah, I wouldn't say I was academic. I would say that I was trying to figure out my whole world in the 4th grade.
Yeah. So no, I can definitely in fourth grade. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. You're probably like 5, 6, 7, but 9 years old that time then. So 9, 10 years old. And that's a big, I find a big age with children because they're starting to go through a lot of changes um, in the whole friendships, building friendships, learning more school stuff. And you're sort of trying to figure out where you want to go and what kind of direction you want to go. I find around that age, you're starting to gain more attention on things like that with studies and with sports and things like that. So, did you did this end up getting you into like a bad crowd, or did you just sort of throw school away at that time, saying, "Well, this guy's really mean"? And because you said you were on honor roll before, were your grades starting to go down now?
Yeah, I would say that especially in the 4th grade, I didn't apply myself. You know, I would go to school pretty much scared because there were kids that were picking on me. You know, there were kids calling me, chink in the 4th grade. I remember, I'll never forget this. This was a gym class, and a couple of the kids in my class, or in the gym class during a game of dodgeball, they grabbed me by the throat and pulled me behind the bleachers, and they said, "Go back to China, you chink." And
Mm,
from that moment on, I was definitely, I would say, I was confused and I felt lonely. I didn't enjoy school, and yeah, that I would say that was definitely a turning point in my
mhm,
life as far as, you know, how I felt about school. So not only was it my teacher who was just not supportive, but definitely kids in the class were not supportive as
mhm,
well. So, uh, I would say from the 4th grade on, I did whatever I could to, I guess, cruise, right? And
yeah,
you know, pass and make it to the next grade, but I wouldn't say that I enjoyed school from the 4th grade on.
right. Now, you said when you first moved into this area, you had that buddy across the road that you met for the first time. He came over, helped you guys move, became a really close friend. Was he still friends with you at this time?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. He was like one of my few friends. I had another friend who lived down the block from me. So it was like literally the three of us growing up
Mhm,
in the neighborhood. We would ride our bikes to, escape our block and, ride our bikes maybe 3 or 4 miles down the road, or it may probably even further, just to kind of, escape, I would
mhm,
say, escape because they actually came from homes that were dysfunctional. And, unfortunately, I grew up in a dysfunctional home as well. So we did our best to not be home
yeah,
and try to find, change our environment.
exactly. And they were in the same school with you or no?
No, no,
Oh, they
they
were in
were,
different, okay.
yeah, they were in different schools. Yeah.
Okay, so but I guess with this thing, like you said, like with you going through what you were going through at school at this time, plus we'll get into the family stuff too. But with all that, and then with what they're going through, this helped you guys. This was a bond that you guys had that basically brought you guys together, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. We were going through the same struggles, just in different ways.
Mhm,
And I would say that's definitely, how we connected, and how we said, all right, if we don't want to be home and deal with what's going on at home, let's find a way to bond and create
yeah.
our own lives.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and that's good. That's good you had that because there's a lot of people that don't have something like that. They just have nothing basically, and they're going through the motions, and you never know what's going to happen to them. So it's good that you guys found each other because, like you said, with that bond, you at least had somebody, other guys that you could trust, and they could trust you, and know that you were taken care of no matter what. If you needed somebody, you had somebody there. So that's good. So you're going through all this stuff now. When did this whole stuff start? When it came to your dad? Because we're probably getting to that time then, I guess, because you're going into high school, I guess, at this time.
Yeah,
And
well, I was still it actually happened earlier on than high school. I just remember it was around 8 or 9 years old. I just remember just watching my dad, sit at the kitchen table, like literally from when the sun came up until the sun went down on his days off from work, because he would work afternoons and evenings. And if he wasn't working, he was home just literally sitting at the kitchen table and in his own world. And
mhm,
from what I learned at an early age is my dad was a gambling addict. He would sit there trying to figure out a way to win the lotto or bet on a horse. And I would see him like sitting at the kitchen table, like writing stuff in his books, but I never understood. And I
mhm,
would always ask my mom, like, what is my dad up to? And my mom couldn't even explain it. But
mhm,
I would call it obviously an addiction to trying to
mhm,
figure out a way for him to change his life. And and possibly, hopefully he was thinking about changing our lives at the same time,
Mhm.
and it did change our lives in a way that maybe he wasn't just aware of, so yeah, I would say at about 8 or 9 years old, there was some there was deep dysfunction going on in the family, with my dad basically ignoring us and bringing home a paycheck, which was great because he was financially of support, but
Mhm.
emotionally, psychologically, verbally, there was
Yeah.
definitely no support in the house. So
What kind of a job did he do full time when he wasn't at the house?
my dad was an orderly at
Okay, at a hospital.
a hospital, maybe uh, in Long Island. Yeah, it
Okay.
wasn't too far. Yeah,
And did your mom work or
yeah. My mother, she worked as a pharmacist technician
okay.
in Manhattan.
So both of them were in the medical field.
Right.
Okay. And so now, um, before you moved at 8 or 9 years old now, so was this stuff taking or going on before you moved, or was this all started after you moved to the new place?
You
That
know,
you remember, of course, or recall?
yeah, like thinking about it now, I just remember my dad always being very quiet, very reserved. But actually, there was one moment back when we lived in Elmhurst where I saw a side of him that I had never seen before. Even at that age, where uh, I would see him leave the house with this brown or the apartment with this brown duffel bag on the weekends. And I remember asking my mom, where does he go on the weekends? And she said that he would go into the city to a taekwondo gym and he would train. He would train martial arts, but he would never say where he was going. He would come back and I could just, literally smell his bag. It smelled like menthol and
Mhm.
rubbing liniment to try, I guess, try to ease the pains of whatever martial art he was training. So I remember asking my mom, like, I want to see what he does.
Yeah.
And she would ask him, weekend after weekend, take your son, take Chris into the city with you. And he would always say no. And then finally one day he decided to take me into the city and he brought me to his dojo. And I remember it was on the east side of Manhattan, and I remember, walking up the stairs to the second floor and walking into the locker room. And again, I could smell that smell of like liniment. And at the
Mhm.
time, I didn't really know what it was, but it was probably like Ben Gay and stuff like that for the old guys, making sure they were warming up. But uh and and he walked out onto the dojo floor and he was a whole different human being. Like,
Mhm.
he was going through his taekwondo forms, kicking and punching and kia, that's the sound that they make when they're performing their moves. Kia, kia. And then I was just like, wow, like this is amazing to just see this side of my dad. And I remember coming home that day and asking my mom, like, how can I do this? How can I, I'm guessing as a kid, I wanted to also bond with my dad because that was probably the only moment I remember at 8 years old bonding with him, sort of, because we rode the train into the city. Um, and and she said, well, we'll leave that up to your dad, and I never joined up. I never got into it. But when we moved into Queens Village, I remember, asking my mom again, after we made the move from Elmhurst, I was like, I want to train Taekwondo. I want to do what my dad does.
Mhm.
And I remember my mom taking me to a place not too far from us, signed me up. And from that moment on, right, I was about 9 or 10 years old. I was a Taekwondo, practitioner.
Mhm.
But also in that turn of events, as I started training Taekwondo, my dad gave it up. I don't know till this day if it was because, we moved away so far away from the city that he didn't want to keep training, or, there was a part of me that felt like, I infringed on something that was his, and I don't know if that pushed him out of, his love for martial arts. So,
Well, I guess at a young age you would think something like that, but
Right.
and it could have also been like you said he was getting into the gambling, so he'd go to work, he'd come home and sit at the table and making these formulas, trying to think of how he's going to win. Was it horse racing? I think you said, or
And playing the lotto.
yeah, I'm playing the lotto. So trying to
Yeah.
come up with formulations on how to get the right numbers and how to get the right horse to win and how it works. Maybe he just got out of it, didn't have the time in his eyes. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, to this day, I mean, never heard the reason for it. But yeah, I for a long time I held on to the thought that it was my fault, that I did
Mhm,
something to push him away from me and the family and his love for martial arts.
mhm. But it never stopped you because you kept going. This is actually now something that you can do now that you're like, wow, I love doing this. And with the whole situation at home, it's now probably a release for you going to these things and doing this stuff. Did you start doing tournaments and things like that at a young age like that? Or did you just practice, practice, practice?
It was more so just practice. I remember doing one tournament. I think I was about 14 or 15 years old. And interestingly enough, I lost that tournament. And I think that was part of one of the reason why I gave it up as well
Mm,
at about 15. So I would say I did. I was fully engulfed in training in martial arts and Taekwondo from about 9 to about 14 or 15, and that's when I, came across Bruce Lee, who I looked at as a mentor and a guide, even though I never met him. But and even though Bruce Lee died before I was born, he was like the father figure that I looked up
mhm.
to, at that
Absolutely.
time. And I did. I put my heart into it for a good number of years. But at 15 years old, uh, it I took a turn, I would say.
Yeah. Now, um, at this time going to school, were you starting to get more into stuff at school, like wrestling team, things like that? Since you were getting into more physical sport like this, did it drive you into doing more stuff at school? Because sometimes extracurricular like that can get you away from the house a little bit too.
Yeah, New York City is the public school system is not, well, like living out here in Jersey, like compared to Jersey, like there's a lot of activities for kids out here living in Jersey, especially for my 12-year-old son. But I would say back in the 80s in New York, there wasn't a lot. It was school and home. I mean, there weren't any football teams or wrestling teams. I mean, in high school, I played a little basketball, but again, there wasn't a lot of funding for extracurricular activities in school. So I would say no, that it didn't lead to anything else in school except, again, my main objective growing up in school was to just make sure I got through the day and got home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then you got home, and then of course there's you and your younger brothers. And were they starting to get into any other stuff too to get out of the house, or were they stuck there basically?
My youngest brother, we didn't have much of a relationship because he
Okay,
was so much younger than me. But my middle brother, yeah, he found a passion. He definitely found the passion in his life to keep him on the straight and narrow, which was
good.
music. He
Yeah.
actually became uh, a very talented hip hop artist. Like he would write rhymes and he would put together beats and he would rhyme and he would try to take his skills, to the point where, I think his goal was to become known as a hip hop artist, a hip hop lyricist. So yeah, I would say my middle brother found the way.
Mhm.
And my youngest brother, um, again, he was so much younger at the time. I don't remember exactly. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, he actually got into tennis, so he became an
Oh, okay.
athlete as well. So he found tennis as a way to, yeah, to a way
As
to
an
keep
escape.
himself on a mission. Yeah, and
Yeah.
find an escape. Yeah.
Yeah. Because and the only reason I ask this is because I know families going through stuff that you're talking about going through, where especially with three young boys and they have a father figure that's not really being a father figure. He's basically got his own curricular going on there, basically ignoring you. It can drive the children to go into, especially Queens, New York, in that area. I mean, you could be getting into a really bad crowd. You can be doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing. And it looks like you guys were able to keep away from that kind of a crowd, which was very good.
Yeah, well, I would say at 15, I pretty much became a statistic. I think
Okay.
that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Because yeah, a lot. Well, from my understanding and research over the years, yeah, the boys and girls, obviously as well, that grew up in father absent homes or what I consider father trauma.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
parent, just parent absent.
or
It could
parent.
be the
Yeah,
mother too. Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Any kid that grows up in that kind of situation finds themselves, in making decisions that aren't the best.
Hmm.
And I definitely got caught up in that at 15, where I unfortunately decided to try to drown my sorrows and my pain and sorrow away by my taking my first drink at 15 years old. And uh, I would say again that was another turning point of my life where things started to spiral, especially thinking, okay, I see a lot of people drinking around me and having fun and partying and having a good time. I remember saying to myself, I want to do that. I want to party and have a good time and feel like I'm happy. But unfortunately, when I started abusing alcohol, I didn't turn into the happy-go-lucky kid. I turned into a very angry kid, much more angry than I was when I wasn't drinking,
Hmm.
and that got me you know, into some trouble in the streets, like fighting and doing things again that could have definitely either put me, in jail or, well, wound up, dead.
Yeah. And did it get you into like we had a guest on here, our second episode way back when, my friend Rob, who was the same as you in high school, getting into the alcohol, things like that. And he would do anything for that alcohol. He would steal from cars, he would break into houses. He just wanted to do anything to get that fix. Were you that far off, or were you just you going when you're partying, just yeah, grab a beer, but you just couldn't control it once you started?
Well, no, well, I would say it definitely spiraled me into making decisions that would could have got me arrested. Like I was, snatching purses and breaking into warehouses and trying. I remember one time we broke into an ice cream warehouse, and luckily at that time back in the 80s there weren't a lot of camera surveillance around, but we were stealing money and stealing ice cream, and getting into fights in the street. And again, I would say getting into smoking weed and doing things that you know weren't constructive in any way. I never, no, I wouldn't say I got into stealing cars, but I definitely, as a kid, I got into shoplifting as well. I remember one
Hmm.
time my mom had to come pick me up at a Macy's not too far from us because I was caught shoplifting. And again, all these, you know, events you know, m- made for a very destructive childhood. And what I learned is that I became just like my dad. I
Hmm.
became uh, more of a drain on the family as opposed to
Okay.
reversing that cycle in my family.
Hmm. And did this start pulling some of your family members away from you, like your brothers, your mom, things like that? Like, I mean, by this time, I guess your dad's basically not in your mind, not even existent at this time.
No, I was I felt a lot of anger towards my dad, and that turned into frustration with my middle brother. And there were times where I was so angry, that even for a simple thing like coming in to eat dinner, if my mom would call him in for dinner and he was down the block and he wasn't listening, I'd become very angry. And I remember one time, I ran down the block to call him in for dinner and he wasn't listening. And I literally grabbed my brother by the hair and dragged him down the block into the house for dinner. And there was also another time where him and his friends were playing video games in the house, and I was actually laid up on my couch with with a broken ankle. I broke my ankle at 15 playing basketball. So I remember sitting there with a cast on my leg, and they were playing. I don't remember what video game it was, but they were getting angry at each other. And I remember telling them, like, "Look, guys, just play the video game and let's leave. Let's not turn this into a fight." And I remember they didn't listen, and it turned into a scuffle. And I remember hopping up on one leg and literally hopping over to the both of them and hitting them both in the stomach, and
Mm,
actually dropping my brother to the ground. And he laid there for hours until my mom got home from work. And with him still laying there on the living room floor, my mom wondering, what the heck is going on in this house. She took him to the hospital and found out he had nothing broken but bruised ribs. And that was just definitely a result of the anger that I had going on in my life because of what was going on.
mhm. So you were turning, like you said, more like your dad, where it's almost like you felt like you were now the father figure in the house, and they basically had to do what you wanted them to do because you were getting angrier, you're drinking a lot. So, and you're just like even though you're getting your higher teenage years, you're still a teenager yourself.
Oh
And now
yeah,
you got all this
still a kid.
burden on you. You feel like you got to run the house.
Yeah. Well, looking back on it, I actually feel like it definitely wasn't a conscious decision to say
Yep.
I want to be the man of the house, because I was just trying to figure out what I needed to do
Yep.
to to survive and move on with my life. But I do look back, and I do have some regrets of not taking on that father figure role consciously, because I was the oldest one, the oldest child in the family. Like, why didn't I do that? But again, I didn't have a lot of guidance from my dad. So I'm not blame the way I talk about my dad nowadays, I don't blame him. I don't, and obviously I don't blame my mother in any way. She did the best that she could as literally a single mom,
Mhm.
because she had no help from my dad. But my dad definitely had his own trauma, I'm sure, growing up in the Philippines, because he came from a pretty humble beginnings himself. And from what I understand, his dad wasn't a great example of what a dad should be. So, again, I don't have uh, any hatred or blame towards anyone in my family. I just I say these things just so that anybody who's listening understands that we all face some kind of trauma in our life, but it's on us. It's on us as human beings to make a choice. Do we keep heading down that road that's gonna, you know, cause us to keep self-destructing, or do we decide to change our direction in life
Yeah.
and choose
Break the
another path?
chain
Yeah.
because you see it all the time. Families that go through traumas like that seem to tend to continue on the next generation and the next generation because that's all they know is how they were raised. They think that's normal. And so they raise their family that way and it keeps going down and down and down. So it's nice to see that you were able to, you were trying your best to try, and your mom too was trying to break that chain and just do the best you guys could.
Right.
Now, did this drinking carry on into your 20s, or did this just eventually you just had a eureka moment saying, no, I'm not doing this anymore?
Well, it definitely went into my 20s. I made it through high school. I barely graduated high school. I actually graduated out of summer school, and I remember getting a job right out of high school. So I was working. It's not something that I enjoyed doing, but it was definitely work. But I was still partying and going out and drinking and smoking and doing the things again that weren't leading me anywhere. I didn't really have any aspirations in life. I figured I would just work a job and just make ends meet. Right after
Mhm.
high school, I didn't have any aspirations of going to college either. So one day, just walking around the neighborhood, looking to head to the local bodega to buy a beer. I ran into a local thug in the neighborhood who we've had beef in the past, and it was basically one of those moments where it was ego, right? My ego
Mhm.
got the best of me. He was getting off of the bus on Jamaica Avenue in Queens, and we stared at each other up and down. And I said, "What are you looking at?" And he said, "What are you looking at?" And we took off our jackets and we decided to, find out right there on in the middle of the
Mhm.
street. And after all was said and done, I walked away with my face, smashed. My ego was destroyed, and that was another turning point in my life where I was like, okay, do I want to keep pretending that this street life is for me, right? Do I want to keep letting my ego get the best of me and try to prove myself on the streets of New York, or do I figure out another way?
Mhm.
And I decided, all right, I'm gonna figure out another way because the street life is not what I wanted. I didn't want to wind up, dead, or I didn't want to wind up in jail, or I didn't want to wind up like, a lot of other, lost kids on the street in New York, just living day by day. I
Mhm.
wanted to have, something to look forward to, a dream. And it's interesting. We were talking before you hit record. We were talking about the old school magazines,
Yeah.
and what happened was I started flipping through the old Black Belt. I remember it was Black Belt magazine,
Mhm.
and I was like, I got to get back into martial arts because from when I was a kid, that's what gave me some sort of direction in life. When my dad was giving up, I was like, okay, I'm going to use martial arts, but then I gave it up. But then with this street fight that literally made me question myself as a man and as a human being, I was lucky enough to flip through this martial arts magazine and find this full page ad. And at the top of the full page ad, it said, "Become unbeatable." And I was like, wow, this magazine or this ad is talking right to me. And I read the full page ad, and it was literally uh, it was a Navy SEAL who put together this 3 tape VHS series of hand to hand combat.
Okay.
And he was saying in this full page ad, like, you could turn your body, or find the natural weapons of your body and turn those into weapons for any situation that could save your life. And I was like, wow, this is what I need. Not that I wanted to keep street fighting, but
No.
I never wanted to feel like I was helpless, like I couldn't save my own life, because honestly, this kid could have taken my life, if not for a friend who was there to get in the middle and stop this fight. And I ordered this VHS tape series, had it sent to my mom's house, and I recruited my brother to train with me, even though at the time he probably didn't want to do it, but I forced him to train with me. And there was all these different martial arts that this Navy SEAL was showing, but then the main martial art that really stood out to me was the Muay Thai, or that he called it Thai boxing.
Okay.
And it was him and his training partner on the VHS tape. They were throwing punches, kicks, knees, and elbows. And I was like, coming from a Taekwondo background, I was like, wow, this looks like something that I used to do.
Mhm.
And yeah, from that moment on, Muay Thai or Thai boxing became, everything to me. It's literally changed my world, saved my life, and put me on this path that I've been on since I was, in my early 20s, since
Mhm.
the mid or the early 90s.
Mhm. And then, from there, if I'm not mistaken, it started taking you into, international because if I'm not mistaken, you didn't do this in, like, New York, you were going to Bangkok and Thailand and all these other places?
Yeah, well, after an amateur career from the mid 90s to about 2004, I won a state title, 2 national titles, and a North American amateur title
Mm.
between 1996 and 2004. And after going to the World Championships in 2004, and winning a bronze medal, I decided, okay, if I can, since I was blessed to have, you know, accomplished all these things as an amateur fighter, I was like, okay, let me take it to the next level. Let me become a professional fighter.
Mhm.
And I became a professional Muay Thai fighter out of New York back in 2005.
Okay. Awesome. And is it around this time, or is it way before then? Like, I don't know when you met your wife and you got married. Um,
Well, so I would say 2005. I fought strictly out of New York City. I fought for a promotion, a very popular promotion back in those days. They're not around anymore, but it was the longest running promotion in New York City for Muay Thai. I was making my name in the sport and in the city, and I was actually fighting a lot of Canadians. There are actually a lot of great Canadian Muay Thai boxers, and one fight I had, it was my seventh professional fight. I was going up against. Actually, let me back it up a little bit. Fight 5 and 6 were also against Canadians, and my fifth fight was this guy from Toronto,
okay.
and he was
My
known.
hometown.
All right, there we go. All right, nothing personal, right? But he was known as a very an accomplished fighter from Toronto,
Yeah.
and my promoter brought him down to New York City, and we signed the papers, and we said, "All right, we're going to do this in New York City, 5 rounds, professional Muay Thai bout." First round in, I was able to knock out my opponent in the first round with a head kick,
Okay.
and the coach said, "Okay, I have another fighter that I can bring down from my gym to test your skills against." So we signed the contract, and they brought down a fighter who was again not again, but he was 6'5", a lot
Okay.
taller than me, a lot bigger, same weight class, and this fight was a lot harder. I made it. I made it into the fourth round, but I was losing the fight. I was getting dominated because this fighter was a lot taller and he was keeping me on the outside. But in the fifth round, I was able to find the way and I knocked him out in the last and final round of the fight. So now their coach is like, okay, I got one more guy that we can bring in, and this guy is going to be, he's going to be a lot tougher for you,
Yeah. Your
guaranteed.
biggest challenge yet.
Yeah, your biggest challenge yet. And I was just like, yeah, okay. My ego started, kicking. I was like, yeah, I got this. I can figure this guy out. And we did a little research on this third fighter, and we knew that he had been training in Thailand and fighting in Thailand for a few years. And we signed the contract. He came down from Toronto, and night of the fight, he came out and we thought we did the research. He came out with a completely different style. He was
Mhm.
a lot more uh a lot more busy.
Okay.
And
A
Muay
little
Thai,
more agile than you thought.
yeah, and Muay Thai is known as more of a a pick your shots kind of fight where you throw, you trade shots back and forth, but it's not a busy active fight, right?
Mhm.
So this fighter came out and he had a whole different style, and I couldn't adjust. And it was the third round, and he had already thrown uh, so many leg kicks, and my knee was damaged, and he was landing a lot of headshots. And I went back to the corner in between the third and the fourth round, and my coach was like, you've done this before. You've been here. You got to find a way because this guy's beating you, and you're not winning on the scorecards. He's like, you got to get out there and stop this guy. I was like, yeah, all right. I mean, I can do that. I've done that twice before already, right? So
Mhm.
again, with my ego not in the right, not in the place that I wanted to be, I went out in the fourth round, and I went for it all. I went for broke. I started backing him up against the ropes, and I was throwing some big shots, kicks, knees, and I wound up with a uppercut. Throwing an uppercut from the rear. And as I was throwing this uppercut, my opponent used the ropes to bounce off of the ropes and come over the top, and he landed one punch on my chin, and I was asleep for 10 seconds.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And that was the first and only time I was ever knocked out. But that was my trilogy against the Canadians. And
Hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I
two
like
out
the
of
old
three
song.
ain't bad. But yeah, but that was that's how I came up with the thought. I didn't come up with the thought, but that's how this thought of fall 7 times, stand up 8 came into my awareness. It's a
Okay.
Japanese proverb that when you fall 7 times, you got to get up. You got to get up. You got to always, always get up, no matter what. And that was my seventh professional fight, and it took me 13 months to get back in the game because not only did I get knocked out, I was also injured in that
Mhm.
fight pretty badly. My ACL, MCL, and meniscus were all partially torn, and it took me a good 6 months of intense rehab to be able to get back in the sport. So I say all that because during my comeback fight after that knockout is when I met my wife, my girlfriend at the time, and it was in the boxing gym, right?
Okay.
The boxing gym I was training at. She just happened to be, she had come from another gym and she just started training there, and I noticed her, and I was like, wow, I've never seen this girl before, and she's got to be the most beautiful professional boxer I've ever seen because the way she was carrying herself in the
Yep.
gym, she carried herself like a professional. She would
Yep.
walk in and, do the things that, professional fighters would do. They wouldn't need anybody to tell them, oh, start wrapping your hands or start shadow boxing or skipping rope. She came in and she did she did what she was supposed to do. And I was like, wow, I can't believe how beautiful she is as a professional boxer. And yeah, that's how we met.
That's awesome. It's almost like a Hollywood movie almost.
Yeah, it's funny because for a while I was like, we got to get this in the movie somehow.
That is awesome. I love it. So then, by this time, are you thinking of you're still going to fight, or are you going to start retiring? Because then, somewhere around here, you start opening up your own gym.
Yeah, actually, so when I met my wife, I was actually a single dad. My son was my older son was living with me at the time. He was around 10 or 11 years
Okay.
old, and my wife and I, or my girlfriend at the time, we decided, all right, we're gonna we're gonna change our lives. We're gonna change because she had just come off of a relationship that didn't work out. She had closed down her vintage clothing business in the city, and I was coming at the time. I didn't realize I was coming to the end of my career, but I was towards the tail end of my fighting career, and I was like, all right, I want to start building a gym. I don't want to just fight anymore. I want to
Mhm.
build a gym. So we moved out to Rockaway Beach, Queens,
Okay.
and we moved in together. It was me, my girlfriend at the time, and my son. And we decided, okay, we're gonna live by the beach, and we're gonna do what we love. We're gonna teach what we love. We're gonna teach boxing and Muay Thai. And in 2010, uh, I opened up the first Muay Thai and boxing gym with my wife in Rockaway Beach, and yeah, that was again another turning point.
Mhm. And it's one way too that you were able to not only make a living at something you love to do, but now you can give back to the community. Because I guess this is when you start opening up your doors to youth and things like that, and getting involved more with the youth programs and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually the main intention was to take what we loved and start helping, giving the at-risk kids in that community,
Mhm.
something, like something that I would have needed, that
Yeah.
would have been great for me. I wish I would have found the sport of Muay Thai at an earlier age and, found the competitive bug to say, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. But yeah, we started a scholarship program for the at-risk kids in our community, and we started building up our fight team. And it wasn't just for the kids; it was also for the teen, for the adults in the community. And we wanted to spread our love for combat sports. And we did that until literally 2 years to the day of when we opened before Hurricane Sandy decided to roll through New York City and obviously the rest of the tri-state area. But when Hurricane Sandy rolled through, uh, me personally, you know, I didn't think anything was going to happen because there was a hurricane warning the year before with Hurricane Irene, and they billed it as the 100-year storm, and
Hmm.
literally, we got like a little windstorm in 2011. So come 2012, when they were talking about how Hurricane Sandy was going to be the 100-year storm that was going to break records and change history. I was like, no, this, I'm not falling for this again, because we left and nothing happened, and
Yeah.
it was a waste of our time. But my wife, who was obviously a lot smarter than me, is still a lot smarter than me. When the storm started rolling in, she was like, look, this is not looking good. We should pick up and go to higher grounds. And we did that literally just before the storm rolled in and drowned the Rockaways in about 6 to 8 feet of
Mhm.
ocean and bay water that drowned our gym in less than 24 hours, and the rest of the community as well. Destroyed uh, the entire peninsula of Rockaway Beach.
Jeez.
Over 100 homes were set on fire in one part of Rockaway, and we were actually at the lowest point of Rockaway, where you know I don't know exactly how many, but tens and hundreds of businesses were destroyed in that
Mhm.
community in that
Oh, that's
time.
too bad.
Yeah.
So was this the end of that dream of the gym, or?
No, it wasn't the end, because I remember, when Sarah and we were sitting in my mom's house, which was again not too far from where we built the gym, where things were fine. They barely got any rain. It just shows you the craziness of Mother Nature. How only 10 miles away they were pretty much safe and sound. But we were sitting in my mom's kitchen watching the storm roll through, and I remember her, my wife getting very emotional, and I was getting emotional as well, watching cars being swept down the roads, and
Mhm.
the boardwalk being ripped off of its foundation, and literally somehow uh, a news camera panned across our gym, and we watched our gym being drowned in 6 feet of ocean water.
Mm.
I remember telling her, I was like, we're going to come back bigger and better than before. Those were the exact words that started in my head, and I remember saying it to her. And I didn't know what we were going to do. I didn't know how we were going to bounce back from that. But just saying it, I feel like I've believed in affirmations for a lot of my fighting career, and even now
Mhm.
till this day. But just affirming that was the moment, was that seed that was planted for us to eventually come back and rebuild to a gym that was, 4 times the size and 5 times the members that we had originally.
Okay, good. No, that's
Yeah.
great. And how long did you have that gym? Because I know now you said you around 2020 you had to close it down, but how long was this now that this gym was open?
Yeah. So we rebuilt after Hurricane Sandy. It took about a year and a half.
Okay.
So I would say 2013, 2014, we were back up and running completely in this in this new space, which was literally right across the street from the old space that we
Okay.
had. And so from 2014, we were able to implement other programs in the gym, because before that it was just strictly Muay Thai and boxing, which
Mhm.
it didn't bring in enough members. So we struggled a lot before Hurricane Sandy. So Hurricane Sandy was kind of a blessing in disguise, because after Hurricane Sandy, with help, help from an SBA loan and things like that, um, we were able to rebuild our gym, and we added in a strength and conditioning component. We added in jujitsu training. We still had the scholarship program going, and I developed my own program in the gym called Shred, which was based around kettlebell training and the training that I did as a, the strength and conditioning that I did as a professional fighter. So we implemented all these different things in the gym, and we were able to rebuild it and bring it to a point where we're like, yes, we we conquered
Mhm.
Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We weren't going to let Sandy take us down. We
No,
came back
no.
bigger and stronger.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so everything was going well. And then, of course, like the whole rest of the world, we get hit with another big, not a physical hurricane, but some sort of another Dalmatian down in 2020 there that affected a lot of people and a lot of businesses.
Oh yeah, and yeah, I remember March of 2020. I was actually I was sitting in an office space in New York City, and I was studying to become a life coach. And I was going through this life coach training, and I remember the proctor standing up in front of the room, and he said something to the effect of, uh, who knows what the future is going to bring, with this talk of pandemic coming. And I didn't, not that I wasn't worried or concerned, but I was like, no, there's nothing that can stop, what we've
Mhm.
been able to come back from. Look at what we did with Hurricane Sandy. We come back, we're huge, we're bigger and better than before. We're unstoppable. But I would probably say that was probably ego talking,
Mhm.
because literally, 3 or 4 months later, with the strains of COVID-19, we weren't able to keep the gym open, and we shut down in May of 2020, permanently.
Mhm. Which is unfortunate because I know and the only reason I say that is I have a local gym just that was down the road from my business here,
Mm,
and same thing happened to them. They had just opened not too far to the point where they weren't getting a lot of the funding from the Canadian government that a lot of other businesses get because they weren't open long enough to be qualified for it. And they made their way through the first couple of them in that, but then when it came to the Christmas time of I think 2020 or 20,
mm.
yeah, I think it's 2020, they had said that if it shut down again, if they made us all have to close our doors again for a bit, we won't recover from that. And that happened. It was the same kind of idea as you. Something the Canadian government said, okay, we're shutting the businesses down again. They couldn't recover and they shut theirs down for good too. So I don't think you were the only one that had to go through that. So
Oh no, definitely not. I wouldn't I wouldn't
especially
ever
in the
make
gym
that claim.
field.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I had a good few, like a good handful of my friends who actually had to close their gyms down as well, because
Mhm.
uh, the strain was just too much financially and obviously safety wise. It was
No,
a safety
exactly.
concern.
Yeah,
So
no, exactly.
yeah.
So now that brings us to what you're doing now because you're saying you were in there, you were trained to be life coaching. And I think that whole thing was able to, I guess, segue you into a new um, career, I guess, with the gym closing down. It was able to get you back into something else that now you're very passionate about.
Oh yeah, and it's yeah, professional youth speaking is what I am is my mission now. I was doing it a little bit before pandemic when we had the gym open, uh, and but the way I look at it is I was thinking of it like as like a hobby, like it was something great to do, running the gym and having an at-risk youth program, going out to high schools or middle schools and sharing this message that I have of champions uprising. But I would say now it is definitely a full-time mission. To the goal is to empower as many kids
Mhm.
as possible about what I call the champions uprising, and that is the champions uprising is the concept of fall 7 times, stand up 8. That every time we get knocked down, there's always going to be a way to pick ourselves back up and get back in the fight, because life is a fight.
Mhm.
And what I share with the kids is that the real fight is not against anybody outside of us. The real fight is against what I call the 7 dictators of our mind. And if we can't be aware of those 7 dictators, if we don't know who the opponents are, there's no way to win, right? So I want to go out. My goal is to go out to as many schools and conferences and summits as possible and have kids become aware of the real fight in life, the internal uh, dictators that try to hold us down. And those
Mhm.
dictators are self doubt, fear, disappointment, hardship, confusion, ego, and self talk. And if we don't take control or uprise against these dictators, they will hold us back from our dreams, our goals, and our aspirations in life.
Definitely. And as you were talking, I'm showing your website here that people can go to, which is just, of course, chrisromolo.com. And it says right in there, Chris Romolo, champ up. And you can see with all the kids there and the empowerment speaking. And um, there's a lot of good videos on there too. I hope people will go and check out your website, check out these videos, see what it's all about. Because definitely you're making a difference in the community. I can tell already. And if somebody wanted to, in your area, is looking at booking you for something, it has right on here. You can book it. What do they look forward to when they book you?
So they look forward to an hour or 45-minute presentation. I always leave room for a Q&A with the kids, but a 45-minute presentation where I do a little skit of shadow boxing, do a little breakdancing, but it's all to engage the kids in the concept of the seven dictators and how can we battle them. And what I share at the end is what I want the kids to walk away with are the three foundational skills, or I call them the ABCs of living like a champion.
Mhm.
And those ABCs are accepting your reality, becoming your dream, and changing your thoughts. So it's again a presentation of me sharing my story of the struggles that I went through as a kid, bullying. I actually my presentations also I also talk about the bullying and how bullying has changed. It's
Mhm.
not the bullying that that we went through as parent, as kids. For the parents and the teachers that are in the audience, it's not the same because nowadays kids can't run from the bullying, right?
Mhm.
Because of cyberbullying. It
Exactly.
follows them everywhere they go. So what I share is that, since there's an evolved way of bullying, we need to evolve the way we address bullying. And it's
Yeah.
not just about saying, stop bullying. It's about, all right, how can we empower ourselves? How can we make ourselves stronger to be able to withstand what is coming at us? Life, again, life is a fight.
Exactly.
We can't stop the circumstances that are going to happen in our life, but we can control our thoughts and our feelings and our actions in response to what happens to us in life. So
Exactly.
that is the main, I would say that is the main message, right? I
Changing the
like to,
mindset of how you react to a situation instead of just going off the cocking end and just going like not even thinking first. Stop, relax, think about it first because same with the bullies. I mean, you don't even know where they're coming from because maybe they had an upbringing that caused their life to be like that. But like you said, I mean, instead of trying to react, try and think of how you can make a better situation out of something that's not so good.
yeah, absolutely. And I like how you brought that up because yeah, it's not just about stopping the bullies. There's situations going on in the bully's life that they need to address themselves. They need to address the self-doubt and the fear. They need to address those dictators. So
Mhm.
it's a collective uh, campaign against bullying that we all need to figure out a way to make ourselves stronger so that we can deal with the bullies of life. Because once you leave school, life doesn't stop
They're
bullying you.
everywhere.
They're everywhere. So instead of saying let's get rid of the bullies, let's make ourselves stronger so we can handle these situations, any
Exactly. No,
situation that comes up.
I think it's a fabulous message, and I think that any of these kids that are learning from you is gonna they couldn't learn from a better person. I mean, with everything you've been through, and just I hear it in the way you speak. You're just very genuine. You're very passionate about what you do, and you can only put that off onto them. And hopefully that you can. It's almost like these are your own little kids, your own little boys, and you're just trying to raise them just like another dad would do. Like you're the father figure there that maybe they don't have.
Right.
And I think it's an amazing message. and I'm
Thank you.
glad that you're out
Appreciate
there doing it. And I wanted to bring up before we go, because I know we're past the hour mark, but I'm okay with that as long as everybody else is okay. Because um, when I do these shows, I can go on for hours and hours. So I know
it.
I've got to eventually cut it short myself. But
That just shows your passion for what you do too.
exactly.
Thank you.
And but for when it comes to learning more about you and what you do and just your whole passion of what it is, you have your podcast too, and I guess you talk about a lot of this stuff in your podcast too, unless it's a totally different situation. But when I look at it's Champ Up Chat, it's a way I guess you can reach to children who can't maybe get to you in another way, maybe, or they're from not in your area. Why don't you talk a bit more about your podcast that you have?
Well, my podcast is not necessarily directed towards the kids because like kids don't really listen to podcasts too much, but
Mhm,
it is definitely based around, you know, the goal is, if you can live your life as a champion, live like a champion and make that decision. Because I always say living as a champion is not for the chosen few. Living as a champion is for the few that choose. It's a
mhm,
decision. So what we do is we put out thoughts on how to, change your thoughts, change your, how to handle your feelings, how to exercise in a way that's going to keep you not only mentally strong but physically strong. So it's all based around the champion lifestyle. And hopefully people listen and maybe they pass on some of the messages to their kids or
mhm.
any youth in their life. But yeah, I would say the Champ Up Chat is definitely an outlet for us is to spread the message to not just the youth but whoever, any adults that listen.
Definitely. I think it's a great message because
Thank you.
what a lot of people don't realize is that kids are sponges. They're soaking up everything they see and hear around them as they're growing up. And if you can install even some of these attitudes that you're talking about and these positive ways of living into a lot of the adults in the world, they can pass this on to their children because the children will see this positive aspect of their life and maybe be able to take advantage of that themselves. And I think it's a great message that you're putting out there, and that's through I think Apple Podcasts, correct? Or do you have it on Spotify too? Or
Yeah, it's also on Spotify as well.
so you
Thank
can
you.
find you anywhere. Just it's
Appreciate
called
that.
Champ Up Chat with Chris Romulo.
Thank you. Appreciate that, John.
No,
Yeah.
I'm glad. And then the last thing I want to talk about before we go, because I know I still have to get my copy, so I'm going to be going online and purchasing it. Is you have a book out that you wrote?
Yes, I published a memoir back in 2017, and it's a little bit more of my story, probably more articulate than the way I was trying to bring it across on this podcast. Because I actually wrote it with a friend of mine who's actually in Thailand. He moved to Thailand to document his passion for Muay Thai as well. And yeah, it's called Champions Uprising, Fall 7 times, Stand Up 8. And we wrote it together and we published it in 2017. And yeah, if it's something that if you feel like you're at a point in your life where you're like, how do I keep moving forward? I don't know. Maybe this book can inspire you to say, okay, challenges are going to come up no matter what. It's not a matter of if life is going to knock us down, it's a matter of when. And then what are we going to use, how are we going to pick ourselves back up and get back
Mhm.
in that fight. So that was the main objective with this book.
Definitely, and I'm definitely going to buy my copy because one thing I always every guest that I get to come on here, I learn so much from you guys and girls, of course, because we all go through different experiences in life. We're not all born with a silver spoon in our mouth. We're not all born in tragedy. I also so.
Right.
I like to learn from a lot of you, and I always do that. I always like to continue my education and find out more about my guests too. And sometimes I find out about books and I try and buy them ahead of time and read it before. This one I'm definitely interested in. I'm definitely going to be going on there and buying it. I'm going to try and find a way to get you to sign it for me too. I don't know if there's a way to send it back to you to get it signed or something. I don't
We
know
could,
if it buy
I'm
from
sure
here,
we
if it
could.
comes from you or if it comes from somewhere else. I don't know.
I'm sure there's a way. We can find a
Well,
way.
there's a way we'll find it, but I'm definitely
Yeah.
going to be buying it because I want to support you and everything that you do. And if anybody remembers my first guest, Carrie Lee Brown. She's actually an editor-in-chief herself, and she actually she publishes books and helps to ghostwrite them, or she'll help you get it to publishing and things like that, and she'll even edit for you and things like that. So if you're ever writing another book, you know who you can go to. But she keeps telling me I got to write a book too, but we're not there yet. I don't think I have enough stories yet to talk about yet. So,
Oh, I'm sure you do. You just got to dig deep.
maybe we'll do a Butler's Babble podcast book where we'll talk about all you guests that came on and all the different stories and the highlights of it. So, but I'm definitely going to be buying your book. I hope everybody else goes out there. You can get it on Amazon. Is that the only place you can get it, or?
Yeah, right now, yeah. We haven't put it anywhere else, only on Amazon.
Not a problem. If anybody wants it, you can always get a hold of me and I can get it to you. The actual where you can find it. It's just Champions Uprising, Fall 7 Times, Stand Up 8. You get paperback version, and you can also get a Kindle version if people I'm not a Kindle guy, but
We spoke about that earlier.
I need a physical book in that. So I'm glad you came on. Is there any last words you'd like to say to everybody that's watching here? Not only today, but anybody who'll be watching the replay, or if they're going to be listening to when we start this up on the Apple ourselves and on Spotify. Some last words you'd like to maybe throw out there for them.
You mentioned it. Like, there's not everybody goes through trauma, right? Not everybody goes through a rough childhood, and yeah, not everybody is born with a silver spoon in their mouth. But best believe there's always going to be challenges that you're going to face in life, and if you can just be aware that it's not just about the external things that are happening. I think this is really important with this in this day and age with, more awareness around mental health, right? If we can't control these dictators and decide that we can change the way we feel and think about these dictators that try to control us, then that's where our mental health can be affected.
Mhm.
So, anybody out there, that is suffering from any mental health, you know, look inside yourself, but also seek help because I do the same. I talk to people. This is a form of mental health for me.
Yeah.
Sharing my story. But I see a therapist. I do things to evolve and learn and grow, so that the things that I dealt with back in my childhood and even in my adulthood, that I can keep finding another way to keep taking one step forward. So I would say, yeah, please, if you're struggling, look for help and look deep inside as well.
Exactly. And my friend Lee, I think, said it best in one of her comments she just put on the screen. There says, change begins at the end of your comfort zone. And I think that's very true. And I always thank all my guests that come on here, because I know you guys, even if you're like yourself, where you're a speaker in public and that, it's still coming out of your comfort zone to, you're letting your vulnerability out and letting people know some of your own personal internal struggles and your family struggles and things like that. And I appreciate you guys coming on here, because I think we can only learn from you guys, so that we can all try and make a better society ourselves. Because we have to, in order to empower and motivate, inspire, we have to have empathy. And I try and tell that to everybody. You have to have empathy for everybody around you, but also empathy for yourself. Like you're saying, look inside yourself. If you need help, seek help. Don't be afraid. It's not like it was before, where it's a big stigma to go out and ask for help. Nowadays, it's there for you. Take advantage of it. And I think you're an amazing person. I hope a lot of children and even some adults who maybe are going through some stuff themselves, don't be afraid to reach out to you. And because I think you have a lot that you could give and a lot that they can learn from you. So I thank you for coming on myself. I hope that maybe in the future we can get you back on here again and get some updates on you and that. I know I'm thinking of maybe at a 2-year mark there, and a couple, what's that, in about 7-8 months of this podcast. Maybe we'll start an anniversary special where we'll get some of your old guests come on and update us on how you're doing and what's going on in your lives and things like that. I hope you'd come back and talk to us.
Well, I look forward to it.
No, thank you very much.
Thank
And I
you.
know people on there, like Leah said, thank you, Chris, and she loved it. And I think we're going to leave it there, because we can go on forever. And I know people have to get to bed in some places and stuff. So thanks for coming on. And we've got actually another episode coming to you next Tuesday night. We'll be posting that soon. So hopefully you'll be able to join us there. And if not, if you're watching this later on, don't be afraid to leave some comments on there or some questions for Chris if you have them, because you can put #replay and put your comment or question in there, and Chris and I will see them, and we'll try and get you the answers if we need to. But for now, Thanks, Chris. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, John.
And until next time, just remember, if anybody asks, say the Butler did it.